There we go. All right. Let's see how many we have. 22. Okay. So we can go ahead and get started. And all right. So jumping back into resource management. Can you guys see my screen? Okay,
Yep.
Yes.
awesome. So, so we talked earlier about tools that we can use to assign people, and these are some of the pre-assignment tools. So, uh, anything that you can give, around assessments, around interviews, around ability tests. Now, I understand that, especially for us, we don't, in the real world, IRL, we don't have a lot of assessments that we give folks before they join the project. For the most part, you are assigned, for example, a programmer, you're assigned a DBA, you're assigned an architect, so on and so forth. You don't have the luxury of giving folks assessments and all of that. That being said, for the test, just remember that the assumption is that you do have access to all of this, and you can administer it to your team members. So um, the scenario in PMI for the test is usually more on the ideal side. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at the test questions. There's an assumption that yes, um, you have this available and you can go ahead and give it to folks to make sure, right? To make sure that you have the best fit for your team. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. All right. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there's the obvious way of looking at this in terms of culture, gender, physical activity, and language. But one of the most important things that you want to have is diversity of thought, right? You want to have team members that think differently so that you minimize your blind spots. Does that make sense? If you have folks that all think the same way, then what happens is you don't have that red team to your blue team. So what I like to do, especially if we're doing something net new or doing something that has a lot of moving pieces. And I'll give you an example. Um, One of the projects I worked on was creating a data warehouse. This was up in Northern California, and it was composed of two hospitals, two providers, and one insurance company, right? So never been done before by them, and it was daunting to say the least because you have to do a lot of data standardization, data sanitizing. You want to call an encounter, right? So we're all using the same verbiage for all the terms that we're working on. And so part of the team, uh, his name is Umar. Um, I told Umar and another team member, to kind of serve as my red team to my blue team. And even though they might agree with the direction that I'm taking, or they might agree with, the common sentiment of the team, I asked Umar to play devil's advocate, if you will. Like always try to see, like, find something that doesn't work, find something that um probably a different way of doing things, or just continue to challenge the narrative, the approach. And of course, not just to challenge for the sake of challenging, but see if you can find something that would make what we're doing, either invalid or wrong or inaccurate or incomplete, right? Look for ways wherein what we're doing is incomplete. And there were several things that Umar and his team, call it the red team, were able to find that we didn't think about in the first go around. And this drastically helped us in our rollout, right, of this unified data warehouse by 2 hospitals and 1 insurance company. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're doing something novel, when you're doing something that no one in the group has done before. Make sure that there's diversity either just by default or diversity by choice, meaning you assign people to say, guys, I need you to be the opposition team, and just look for ways wherein we're missing something. Um, I want you guys to really take the time to digest that point, because it will save you so much time, effort, and energy if someone is looking at how can this go wrong and how is this incomplete, how is this inaccurate. The fastest way to project failure is when everyone is thinking the same way, because your blind spots are just ginormous, right? Because no one is looking in a different direction. Let me stop right there. Just want to make sure that don't have any questions with regard to this point. Cool. Awesome. All right. So this was the resource management plan. Again, for the test, this is one of those things that you need to memorize. So resource management plan is the project document that identifies the resources. And notice how this word comes up again, acquire, right? Acquire, allocate, monitor, and control. So you identify them, you acquire them, and then you manage them. So those are things that keep coming up. But the document that identifies resources is your resource management plan. Does anyone remember the document that has the names of the stakeholders?
Is that our stakeholder register?
Yes, stakeholder register. Yep. Yep, yep, yep. So not to be confused with the resource management plan. So what is the biggest difference between the resource management plan and the stakeholder registry? Any guess?
I don't recall. I was going to ask to go back to the stakeholder register and get a refresher on that.
No worries. So when you hear the word resource, remember the word task.
Cool.
So resources are assigned to tasks, right? So if you're planning a retirement party, your resources are the people that, pick up the cake, find a room, send out the invite. Those are your resources. Stakeholder are people that are affected by the project, which includes the resources, but are not limited to them. So for the retirement party, right, the person retiring is a stakeholder, of course. The person's maybe some family and close friends that you might want to invite to the retirement party, maybe the department employees of that retiree, right? So you're you're inviting them, but you're not necessarily assigning them to tasks. Does that make sense? So the key difference between the resource plan and the stakeholder registry is task. All the resources have tasks, while not all of the stakeholders have tasks. So if there's a task assigned, they're your resource.
I have a question. Is this similar to the RACI chart that you showed us previous?
So very good question. So the RACI chart determines your engagement, what you're doing, right? How are you related to the project? So let's say, for example, let's just stick with this retirement party example, right? So say that Nikki is the one that is in charge of this retirement party. It's Nikki's friend. So she's in charge. She's the overall person in charge of this. So is that an R, an A, C, or an I? Overall person in charge of it.
An A.
She's the only one. That's
Today,
another.
accountable.
She's accountable, right? She's accountable. Right? So she's accountable. She's the one putting this together. And next, so the people that she assigned, so Kelly, you're in charge of getting the cake and say flowers, for example. And Jennifer, you're in charge of letting the family know and inviting other folks. And you're also in charge of keeping it a secret, right? This is a surprise retirement party. And let's say that Chris is in charge of getting a card, and Edward, you're in charge of reaching out, for example, to the husband, right, to ask what would be a good gift, a funny gift, and then we're gonna let everyone in the department know. So let's start to break that down. So the people whom Nikki gave tasks to, right? Get the flowers, invite people, find a location, this, that, or the other. All of them would have what letter in the RACI chart?
R,
R, right? Because they're responsible for A, starts with the letter T.
a task,
Task, exactly. All of them are responsible for a task, right? So if there's a task assigned to you, you're responsible. And if there's a task assigned to you, you're included in the resource plan. Does that make sense? So notice how there were other characters in this story. We asked the husband, what should be what a good gift, a funny gift that we can give, right? So what is the husband's role in the RACI chart?
C.
Console. C.
C,
Yeah.
right?
C,
Exactly.
yeah.
We're consulting the husband, right? And lastly, we also reached out to the co-workers within the department, letting them know of this retirement party, right? And asking them, keep it a secret. So what letter would the co-workers have?
I.
I, right? We're just informing them. Right?
Right.
So that's an example of how we use the RACI chart. That's an example of how we capture folks in the resource plan. And that's also an example of how we capture people in the stakeholder registry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit. Okay.
Okay. Um,
It all ties together.
yes, it all ties together. So, to bring this point home, I'll ask questions and you guys tell me the answer, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, where would I put folks who are assigned tasks to this retirement party, what document would that be in?
The resource management plan.
The resource management plan. That's your primary document.
Okay.
That being said, they're also mentioned in the stakeholder, because they're also stakeholders of this. Does that make sense? So they're also part of the stakeholders. Now, everyone else that doesn't have a task assigned to them, are they gonna be in the resource plan? No, right? Because they're not a resource for this initiative, right? For this simple party that we're trying to put together. So the key word again is task. If there's a task assigned, you're on the resource plan. If there isn't a task assigned, but you're part of the party in this case, then you're captured in the other document, the stakeholder. And going back to the RACI matrix, if there's a task assigned to you, what letter will that be for everyone that has a task assigned?
R.
Letter R, right? The person in charge of this retirement party, what letter is that?
A.
A. Everyone that we ask about the retiree of what they like, do they like vanilla ice cream or chocolate? What type of flower? What letter would they be?
C.
C.
C, right? We're asking them for their expert advice. And last but not the least, people that we invite to this party that don't have any task assigned to them.
Stakeholders. I.
So-
I.
Exactly. Perfect. So, I hope that exercise helped with the RACI, stakeholder, and resource. Cool. And don't worry if you're at 80% understanding all of this. That's actually pretty darn good considering that this is day one. And as we go along, these things are going to become more intuitive for you. Okay. Awesome. Is it okay if we move on? Yes. Okay. Blink twice if yes.
Can we go back to the stakeholder register really quickly? I just want to grab that
Sure.
screenshot.
Oh, no worries, man. So here's an example of it.
Cool.
You don't need to memorize, all of the columns, but just so
Mhm.
you're familiar. Yeah.
Aware of what we're trying to do in general with it.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And all of the slides, so you don't need to take a screenshot, just so you know, all of the slides are in your Google Classroom.
Cool, thank you.
So it's all going to be there from the slides today all the way to this slide till our last day. So they're all preloaded for you.
Thank you.
A question, are all resources considered stakeholders as well?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Absolutely. Because how we define stakeholders are people that are directly and indirectly affected by the project. So if you're literally in it, doing it, so yeah. Cool. All right. So for the resource management plan, you have their roles and responsibilities. Okay, we need to take some time to break this down too, because there are some new terms and also they typically show up in the test. So let's go one by one. A role is a person's function in a project, right? What is it that you do? That's your role, right? Authority is the right to use resources, make decisions, accept deliverables. So as a project manager, you'll have the authority, let's say, to a budget, right? A certain amount that was approved for this project. So you can use within that allocated budget you have the authority to do so, right? Responsibility is these are the assigned duties, and competence is the skills and capabilities that are required to do the role, right? So I'm gonna stop share for just a little bit. Okay. So you tell me which one I'm talking about, okay? From that slide. So this gives either the project manager or the project team members the right to use resources, make decisions, or accept deliverables. Is that letter A, role, letter B, authority, letter C, responsibility, or letter D, competence?
B.
B, right? B, right, absolutely. This is a person's function in a project. Is that role? Is that authority? Is that responsibility? Or is that competence?
Roll.
Yep, nailed it. This is the assigned duties. Assigned duties. Role, authority, responsibility, or competence.
Responsibility.
And last but not the least, these are the skills and capacities required to do the role assigned to you. Is that role, authority, responsibility, or competence?
Competence.
Perfect. All right, got it. So as we go along, we're gonna have these exercises where I try to make you remember things, and we're gonna do it multiple times, so that hopefully by the time we get to week 10, this is like, Ian, come on, move on, I got it. We remember this. So all right, so what's in the plan? You have your org chart, usual stuff in the resource management plan. You have a guide, how to use, define, all of that. Usually if it's pretty intuitive, don't need to explain it. But you do have, training strategies, requirements, team development methods, and we'll have more slides to go over team development methods. Resource controls, what can you do to manage? And this, okay. So for version 7, when we talk about resource management, it includes human resources, your actual team members, and it also includes your materials, equipments, and supplies, right? So resource management includes the human resources, the people, and it also includes your physical resources. And this is your equipments, materials, and supplies, okay? So just have that in mind when you see questions about resource management. And last but not the least, recognition plan, how to reward or recognize team members. Okay. Rule of thumb, you want to praise in public and you want to provide constructive feedback in private. All right, virtual teams. So in 2025, this is just called Teams, right? Pretty much every team has a virtual component to it, right? So when version 7 came out, this was pre-pandemic, so it have for the most part teams that you meet with every day, and then there's folks on the screens, but now that's kind of flipped. So what are the considerations for virtual teams? You have the skill sets, right? You have lower workplace cost. As you can imagine, the rent of spaces when everyone, just sticking with UCLA, right? When everyone was on site, imagine the amount of footprint we had, and imagine the the rent that we had to pay, right? Avoiding relocation expenses. So if everyone had to be, within an hour or so of the campus, could you imagine, right? The cost of that. So those are some of the considerations why virtual teams is a good fit. Managing communication. Again, we talked a little bit about what tools you can use, right? Making sure that everyone has access to said tools. This enables effective team performance if everyone can use the tools. And bonding and team dynamic may be difficult to develop. So one of the projects that I'm asked to help out with is there's this hospital in Philadelphia, and they want to build a 20-story new tower, right? And they needed someone with healthcare construction experience, so they asked if I could help consult with them. And so one of the first things I ask is, when are we all going to be on site to meet the people, right? Our key stakeholders. And they said, well, actually, we don't have an approved budget for travel yet. And I brought up the fact that, I'm the number one person to bring up technology as a tool. However, as with any tool, there are limitations. And this is one of them. Establishing that initial rapport, building trust among team members, all of that takes a lot of time if you're doing it virtually. It's so hard to replicate that experience when you're meeting people, going out to lunch, possibly having happy hour, and just talking about what happens after 5 o'clock. What consumes your weekends? Do you guys go to ball games? What are things that you guys like to do, either with your partner or with your family, for fun? So all of that helps establish rapport, builds trust, and in the long run, expedites, right? Expedites team development and performance. So I know that there are, limitations to the tools. And in virtual teams, I think that's one of the biggest limitation is building that foundational relationship. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. What do you guys think about that, the difference between the in-person experience and the virtual experience? Love to get your thoughts.
There's, there's definitely benefits to doing stuff in person. My team is mostly remote, but we come in, every now and then for, projects and stuff. And one of the worst things I could say is like when we come all on site and it's one of those things where like, oh man, this could have been an email, or we're doing the same thing we would have been doing, at our desks, remotely. So we call it like we're on site with a purpose. So as long as there's like that goal that we're working towards, that's definitely when in person, clearly wins.
On site with a purpose. I love that. I love that. Yeah. Cool. Anyone else?
Might be an outlier with this, but like I feel like since COVID, a lot of our roles have been predominantly remote, at least on their like the IT side, to where we kind of lost our housing. We've been forced to adapt to this skill set of how to make friends over Teams, which isn't easy. Like Jen, like she was there and I was new to the team, and we had to figure out how to make these connections, which isn't always easy, but it can be done with the right people who care about the job and are trying to work towards common goals, and also be willing to like step outside of what you usually do of just turn off Zoom as soon as the meeting's over. You just turn off Zoom. Like we have a pretty good, strong team to where we kind of stick around and BS after we get our job done. So, but it's also led by the top of like kind of setting that example of we're going to be friends and we're going to make this work because this is kind of the environment we also want to be part of too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but being on site with a purpose, you can obviously you can never beat that. It does make everything a lot easier, but I think this is a skill set a lot of us have developed since COVID started.
I 100% agree. And one of the things I try to do, like right now, I'm helping with a faculty practice group, and we're putting in this interactive phone system for 6 units, 6 departments, right? Or units within the department. And as you can imagine, just the statement of work and contracting is it is quite a challenge to try to consolidate all of that for 6 units. So one of the things I promised the team is that once we get these all signed up, we're gonna go out for happy hour. It's gonna be a bit of a drive for some of the folks, but um, it's one of those huge milestones that we definitely need to, sit down and grab something and cheers to that success. So if you can't obviously meet regularly, then meeting during milestones is a second best thing, right? So you can celebrate that milestone and also to your point, just put your hair down and talk about other things outside of work. So cool. All right. Um, assign project responsibilities. So in in the earlier chapter, I mean the earlier versions of the PMBOK, the focus has been more on the technical side and more on the hard the hard skills as they put it. But now in version 7, there is that huge emphasis on the soft skills, which in the big scheme of things, I think it's a bad dichotomy of calling, ability to do either manual work or computer work as hard skills and ability to communicate and resolve conflicts as soft skills, because there is nothing soft about dealing with conflict. There is nothing soft about figuring out the right communication method, right? Or fixing communication issues. There's nothing soft about it. But for the purposes of the test, um, anything around character, anything about communication, is considered, soft factor. So when you're looking at the team members, you need to consider both, their technical aptitude and also their soft skills, ability to work with the team members. So for Agile, another thing is as we go through the sessions, you'll quickly start to see that we we provide examples for Agile and we provide examples for traditional, or what's also known as waterfall, right? So for Agile, self-organizing teams assess work requirements and determine who will do the work. For traditional, you're typically assigned to the work by the PM. So Agile has a little bit more flexibility and freedom for the team members to say, hey, Chris is way better at that. Can we give that to Chris? Or Jennifer, can you switch with Lizette, or Lizette might say, hey, I think Jennifer is better at doing this than I am. And so there's a lot more flexibility. Whereas for waterfall, typically when you see that, project plan, you already have folks assigned to the different tasks. So for the test, remember that Agile has the self-organizing capability, whereas traditional or waterfall, you are assigned by the PM. Okay, so all right. So rates, so obviously, you want to make sure that you are mindful of the budget of the project. And so, if you're looking at, especially when you have outside resources, contractors, consultants, and whatnot, you want to look at the ability, the experience, what do they bring to the table, um, vis-a-vis their rates. And don't focus too much on the brand. This is what I've seen a lot of hospitals do, is they just go with the brand. So, like big brand name, they come in and their rates are, let's say 225 to like $300. But the people that they assign to the task are new grads or relatively new, although they come from really good schools, right? So you want to make sure that the rates are commensurate to the expertise that they bring to the table, and not just the branding of the firm that they come from. And especially now with AI, a lot of the work that consulting firms can do can now be done easily, right, by the client. So I saw today this meme that said the next biggest consulting firm will not be a McKinsey, but will be OpenAI. Right. So there's this, picture of Sam Altman, which was kind of tongue in cheek, but in a way is true, because a lot of these things that, we're paying the McKinseys for can be done with someone with less expertise, but empowered by, a chat GPT, for example. So make sure that for the rates, it's commensurate, the amount that you're paying for is commensurate with the KSA, the knowledge, skill, and aptitude that they bring. All right, resource assignment. So you want to make sure that the project plan, right, has the right team members assigned to the project. And if you don't have the names, that's okay, as long as you have the roles, right? I am very focused on the roles and the responsibilities more than the names themselves, because if you're not clear on the role and the work that needs to be done, then you're setting up the person, the team member, up for failure, right? You need to really make sure what the role is, what the responsibilities are, what do the deliverables look like, how do you measure success for said deliverables. And once you have all that done, then you find a team member that can perform the work. But always focus on the roles and responsibility first before you bring in the team member. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? Okay, so nurturing team performance. As you can see here, highlighted knowledge, skill, attributes, and experience. So those are things when we're talking about the team performance, it's usually KSA, knowledge, skills, and A could be attributes, A could be attitude, and A could be aptitude. So KSA, knowledge, skill, and if you're writing it down, it's attributes, it's attitude, and it's aptitude. Right, so those are things that PMI uses interchangeably for the A. All right. So one thing to take note of is that the skill sets and the performance, the KSA that we just talked about, these are not static things. These are not things set in stone. These are dynamic things, meaning that Pete, for example, might have the right skill set for what he's working on right now, but there might be changes in requirements, there might be changes in scope, and now all of a sudden, Pete might need help with the work that he's doing. So make sure that as you're having your regular meetings that you're checking in with the team members and asking, hey, for the work that we have for next week or for next month, is there anything here that you feel that you might need help with? Or if it's a really big project, especially if it's multi-year, there are instances where you have to send your team members to a specialized training. An example of which is when we implemented Epic years and years ago, right? No one obviously had Epic skill sets. So guess what? We had to send the project team members to get Epic training, right? And as new modules came up, now we're sending them to have, you know, these not refresher courses, but new courses, right? New modules that they have to learn and bring those skill sets back to in this case, to UCLA. Does that make sense? So again, for the test, knowledge, skills, and attitudes are not static, they're dynamic. And the project manager has to constantly check in to make sure that the team has the right knowledge, skills, and attitude for the work ahead. Okay. All right. Knowledge transfer. Okay. So there are two things that you have to keep in mind for knowledge transfer. The first one is the knowledge transfer amongst folks within your team. You know, make sure that if someone knows something that other team members can benefit from, then by all means, like let's find a way for folks to share. For example, Victor has figured out a way to run the scripts faster. So instead of just saying, okay, cool, so that task is done, you might want to spend a few minutes to ask Victor, hey, Victor, what did you figure out? What were you doing before? What are you doing now that maybe the team members can learn from and maybe use? So that's knowledge transfer within the group. There's also knowledge transfer among team members, right? Especially if you have a a big project, you have different teams that are working on the project, right? You might have the security team, you might have the database team, you might have, you know, different teams, the infrastructure team. And so if there's anything that one team knows of that they could share that could help the other team members, you're always on the lookout for that. And last but not the least is the knowledge transfer when it comes from project completion, right? Also known as your lessons learned, that you're giving to people that are doing same or similar project, but for either a different location or for a different time. So for the UCs, the beauty of working collaboratively with, you know, the other campuses, San Diego, San Francisco, is that we're all doing similar projects, right? And so if there's a campus that has done it before and we can take advantage of it, we have these, you know, multi-campus meetings that we do regularly, and them sharing the knowledge of like, hey, when we did this, these are the lessons learned, these are things that we wish we would have known. So that is a knowledge share from someone who has completed a project to someone who's about to embark on it, right? So 3 types of knowledge transfer. First one is within the team, right? They're just amongst yourselves. The second one is between the different teams doing the project. Again, the DBA team, infrastructure team, you're sharing. And the third type of knowledge transfer is for those who've completed a project that's similar to what another team is about to embark on, right? So let's say UC San Diego, they're about to do an upgrade to their infrastructure, for example, and we've just completed that. Sharing that knowledge with them, our lessons learned, is an example of the third one. Okay. So let's do this. Jennifer, Give me one type of knowledge transfer. So there are 3 types that we talked about. Just give me one type.
I'm not sure which Jennifer you're referring to, but
Oh,
I will
sure.
share one knowledge transfer between your own teams.
And what does that look like? Give me an example.
I would say one example. Our team works on Compass Rose, which is a Epic module, pretty frequently. I've had experience working on that from another organization when I came here, while UCLA didn't use it yet. So I got the chance to kind of share that knowledge that I have with the rest of my team so that we can use that knowledge for implementation here.
Awesome. All right. Elicio.
Yes, Ian.
Hey, Elicio, give me another example of knowledge transfer. So the first one that was given by Jennifer Ng, did I pronounce it right? Nang.
You had it right the first time. Ing.
Oh, Ng. Okay, so the first one that Jennifer Ng mentioned was knowledge transfer within the team, right? Jen, did it?
Yes.
Sounded like it was outside the team.
I guess it could have been both.
So were they so once you cross over to a different team, so that's the second type, right? So there's one that like your immediate team, and the second one is if you're crossing over to another team within the same project. And then the third one is obviously you've completed it, and then there's a new group that's about to start the same or similar project. So I think yours was more the first one. Elicio, do you have an example for a knowledge transfer either among teams or a team that has completed and a team that's about to start?
Well, we have several mutual projects with different entities within either my team, the facility team, and the different network teams.
Nice. So in that case, that would be knowledge transfer between teams. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I have one for the last one. Where you talking
Please.
about, let me just make sure I understand it. This is Alicia. The last one that we haven't gotten an example for is we finished our project, but someone is starting a similar one. So we may want to, impart lessons learned, things like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so I have one of those now where now I'm on the ops side, so I'm not IT, so it's still relevant though, where we have an operational process where we're developing plan materials for our members. And myself and my team, well, me and one other person, we actually completed the work ourselves. So we had multiple roles and wore multiple hats. But then we hired someone, totally different team, but we need to transfer knowledge. Because we actually completed or managed the project for 2024, and now we need to hand it over to them for 2025. So we did some knowledge transfer. We shared documents that we put together that helped us with understanding our project, and we put documents together that some lessons learned, some things that we really did not do well, and had to pivot mid-project, and we shared that as well. And we also shared decisions that have to be made at different levels. So there are decisions that functional areas can make, and then there's a decision that has to be made by the president of the health plan, right? And so we overstepped our bounds last time in the project, so we learned quickly, how to identify those types of business decisions that have to be made at a different level. So I hope that that was a fun.
Yes. No, that's thank you for sharing. Cool. Everyone clear on the 3 types of knowledge transfer? All good there? Okay. Moving along. All right. Defining team ground rules. why do you think that it's important to have ground rules for the team? Any ideas?
So that everyone has their proper direction, where they're going, where they're being led, what they're doing, so on and so forth, so that people don't decide to run off and start doing things on their own without proper direction and such and so forth. So it's important.
I like order. I think that's probably connecting what you're saying. Order, direction, how we're going to work together.
Ding, 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 ding. So for the test, it's that last one you said, Alicia. It's how we're going to work together. All of what you guys said are absolutely correct and important. But for the test, it's how we're going to work together. So that's why we have team ground rules. Because absent that, the team members with strong personalities would just overshadow the team members who might be a little timid, right? And I'm sure that everyone on the call has had that experience wherein um, the loudest voice in the room occupies most of the airtime during the meetings, right? So the ground rules, helps to prevent that from happening, right? So that everyone can have a chance to share their thoughts, and everyone is respected, and everyone is held accountable for the work that's assigned. So for the test, the team ground rules are to help ensure how we treat each other during the project is respectful, and also everyone has a chance to voice their opinions and their concerns. So in terms of the deliverables, you have a team charter, which has, these are, when you hear the word charter, write down the word high level. So this is a high level document of what to expect, right? In terms of the ground rules. So you might want to say, the team charter might have a vision statement, like Kenny's team envisions a high performing group that is mindful of respectful of each other, right? So you might have a mission statement. Our mission is to deliver the highest quality, insert, whatever it is that the project is doing in there. And then you could have, and here's how we're going to go about doing it. So that then leads into the team norms. So when you hear the word norms, what comes to mind? What are norms?
Like acceptable practices?
Yes, absolutely. Or really,
Typical?
I was
really,
gonna say
The day to day.
it's just practices, right? So once you put acceptable to it, then you're in sociology, now you're looking more at what's called the mores, right? So norms and mores. So norms is just practices. And
Right.
practices could be good and practices could be bad, right? So just the practices of the team. So defining it, like this is what we expect the norms to be, right? So that's when Jennifer, you have the word accepted to it. But in its truest sense, norms is just practices, good or bad. And mores, this is the ethical component, or what we strive to do. This is what we hope for, right? So norms or practices, and you want to capture that so that it's clear to the team, what's expected and not expected. In terms of tools, you have your negotiation skills, where people can say, hey, how do we negotiate differences, and it could be something as easy as, let's pretend we're all on site, and every week, twice a week, let's say, we all have a team lunch, right? So how do we figure out where to go to lunch, right? If you're a team of 7, I'm sure not everyone wants to go to a burger joint. So how do we figure that out? Maybe not everyone wants pizza, so how do we figure that out? So your negotiation skills, conflict management skills, brainstorming, right? Where do we go for lunch? And ethics. So let's say, for example, that Patrick, he really loves, vegan food. And so, okay, so we'll go there this week. How about next week? How do we figure out if someone wants to go for pulled pork or short ribs? Like how do we make sure that we honor Patrick, right? And also the team gets to have their fried chicken if that's what they want. So making sure that the place that we go to also has vegan and vegetarian options. That's just a very basic example of that. But all of these things, whether you're looking at where to go to lunch or figuring out, how do we treat each other as we're going through the project, those are things that, again, even if it's actually recommend, not even if, I recommend just having a one pager, right? We agree that this is how we're going to approach each other. We agree that, for example, we're going to meet regularly, at least once a week. We agree that if there's an issue, that we'll bring it up right away and not wait for it to fester. We agree that if 2 members cannot agree on something or cannot resolve an issue, that we'll bring in a project manager or a facilitator. So on and so forth. The most important thing, and again, PMI doesn't dictate what that is for you, but the most important thing is that you at least have one, right? Have a document that captures your ground rules. I've been involved in a few mergers and acquisitions, and let's just say it is not pleasant, right? It's not pleasant for the group being acquired. It is not pleasant for the smaller company that's merging into the big company, right? Because a lot of times the smaller group has to bend toward the norms of the bigger group, right? And so part of what I typically include is the talking stick. Have you guys heard of this? So the talking stick is just a visual. It could be an actual stick. I don't, because it's hard to bring it through TSA. But any object could be your quote unquote talking stick. And anyone who has that stick, you can have it for, let's say, 2 minutes. And while you're holding that stick, let's say Lizette has the stick. While Lizette has the stick, she has the floor for 2 minutes. While she's holding the stick, right, Pete cannot butt in. Nick can ask a question, but Lizette has the opportunity to say, I'll get to it after my 2 minutes. Does that make sense? So for difficult projects, you might want to think about using a talking stick. For projects wherein you have team members that are on opposite sides, you might want to have a talking stick so you can honor and respect the person talking. And with that, it's 3:01. Let's go ahead and have our 10-minute break, and then we'll go for our last stretch for the day. But before we do, how are we doing? Doing good?
Doing good.
Good?
Doing good.
Thank you, thank you. All right, see you at 3:11.
Sounds good.
All right, welcome back.
And may I ask you a question?
Nope.
Okay, so I can't figure out how to get back to this Gmail classroom thing. I swore I saved the link. Don't make me laugh.
I love it how people say, can I ask you a question? And even if you say no, they proceed.
That's right. I'm just gonna move forward.
I'm kidding. For the Google Classroom, what was it again?
I lost my link. I don't know how to get back to it. I know it's user error. I already know.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Does anyone have the Google Classroom link? Otherwise, I can ping Michelle.
I
There
thought
we go. Jenny, thank you. Jenny Palomo.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Awesome, awesome. All right. Last stretch, folks. We're almost there with day one of our 10-day journey. Let me know if you're seeing my screen. Yes, no.
Yeah.
Oh, there you
Yeah.
go. Okay, cool. Sorry. I was I was looking at the screen that had no photos, so if you guys were nodding, I apologize. I didn't see it. All right. Okay. So team norms, again, establishing the expected behavior of the teams, so everyone understands what is expected of them, and they should align with the PMI's code of ethics. So in your Google Classroom, Michelle should have a copy of this for you guys. If not, just go ahead and ask her for it. So there's I can't remember, I think like 13 pages or something. So just remember to review it before you take the test. All right. So for the code of ethics, the focus is on responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty. Really, basic things that we expect of one another, and not just in projects, but in our day-to-day interactions. So team charter, a document that enables a team to establish its values, agreements, practices as it performs and works together. So again, one of those things that you have to commit to memory is the definition of the team charter. You don't need to remember it verbatim because typically the questions are going to be, say, for example, Francisco is the project manager and he has an issue with Ebenezer, because Ebenezer is, not allowing others to share their opinions. And then let's say Jasmine um, uh, is referring to a document that has the list of its values, agreements, and practices. What document is Jasmine referring to? Letter A, stakeholder register. Letter B, resource plan. Or letter C, team charter. So, right, so obviously team charter, but that's how they would frame the questions. Does that make sense? They're not just going to come out at you and say, what document enabled? So it's usually a scenario, right, that they throw at you. Let's give another scenario. So you're trying to figure out who are the team members that are assigned to the project and what skill sets they bring to the table. For this, Patrick, what would you ask the team member, Alicia, to provide for you? A, team charter, B, stakeholder registry, C, resource plan.
I think I'd be looking at the resource plan.
Resource plan, exactly. So that's how the questions are going to be framed for you. So you don't need to know the words verbatim, but just know the sentiment and you'll be fine. So again, things that might be included in the team charter. What are our shared values, right? Guidelines for communication. This is huge. Decision-making guidelines. So remember that Ray Dalio story I told earlier, where if you're the subject matter expert, you're given more weight, which is super unique. Conflict resolution measures. How do we do it? Meeting time, frequency, and other agreements. And this includes, again, if we were all on site, putting lunch in the refrigerator, right? What are rules around that? And I don't know if you guys remember when we were all on site, the use of the microwave, where someone would put in something that would just absolutely make the break area unusable. So what are our guidelines around what to put in the microwave, for example? So all of these things, you know, small things like the microwave and refrigerator space, all of that affects the team dynamic. And the more that you can just throw it in there, the better. Another huge one for the refrigerator was, when do we clean it, right? Like end of the month, if you have something that you want to take home, take it home. Let's say the cleaning is last Thursday of the month, right? So last Friday, make sure you take it home, because on last Thursday of the month, take everything home, because on Friday we're gonna throw everything out. That is our refrigerator cleaning schedule. So things like that. Could you imagine if you didn't know that rule, and you you had something from Costco that you threw in Thursday, and then the next day it's gone. You're like, oh, what happened? Well, we agreed that every last Friday we're gonna clean out the refrigerator. And Kenny, they're like, what? I didn't know about that rule. And so, yeah, so you want to make sure that, again, simple things like this makes a world of a difference. Another example would be, let's say that you're traveling on site, right? Are we gonna do carpool? Does everyone get their own car from Avis? You know, in terms of hotel, do we all stay at a Marriott, or can we choose our own hotel? All these things that are friction points, right? That you don't want to have for the team. So the more that you can figure this out ahead of time, the better it is, because friction points don't need to be big to cause issues. It could be small, but if it's recurring or it adds on, oof, that is a cause for problems. So let's say, for example, Kelly. Kelly loves to stay at very expensive hotels, but we don't have a policy for it, right? And Jenny is like, I'm being mindful here. I'm staying at a Holiday Inn, and Kelly is at, a super expensive 5-star. Well, guess what? If we didn't make it clear what the parameters were, shame on us, right? So all those things, eventually, and I'm sharing this from experience. I had a team member, his name was Livio. He will drive an hour to get to the client site just to stay at a 5-star hotel. Like, he does not care about the drive. Like, he was like, we had a client in it was like at the edge of New Jersey, New York. He would stay in New York. It just so he doesn't have to stay at, a Holiday Inn or those town suites or whatever they're called. And I was like, God, Livio. But guess what? We didn't have any policy around it, so he was free to do that. But it was always a subject of contention, even though, kiddingly, we'd all be like, so where's Livio gonna stay this week, right? So as a PM, pick up on those things. What are things that people are jokingly bringing up, and see if that is truly a friction point. So, okay, definitions, ground rules. They are in the team charter, right? And they help create clear expectations regarding the code of conduct. So going back to that talking stick, it will save you a lot of time, especially if there's one or two people in the group that takes up all the oxygen in your conversations. That simple talking stick can help alleviate you having to jump in every time to say, "Hey, Kenny, it's Ian's turn to speak." So, if you have the talking stick, you just have that, timer, and then Kenny would know that it goes off. Oops, time to give that talking stick to someone else. So, um, again, sets the expectation, decreases confusion, and ultimately improves team performance. Negotiation skills. All right, so whether you're trying to figure out where to go for lunch or how much to pay for a 20-story tower, right? We all use negotiations every day. Now, one of the things that, as you get good at this, and trust me, I'm still learning myself, is understanding that it's almost never your point of view or the other point of view that's correct. Almost never is it 0, 100. More often than not, the right answer is the third alternative, to quote Stephen Covey. And that third alternative is the one that neither one of us came in with. That's the one that we create together as we go back and forth and figure out what's called a win-win, right? So, in the book, one of the chapters was devoted to dealing with the dichotomy of and or, and how companies, for example, Wendy's, decided not to take the bait for and or. For example, in the fast food, going back to the Wendy's example, you have a choice between being fast and convenient or fresh. Wendy's said yes, right? So we're not gonna choose between fast and convenient and fresh. We're gonna say yes to both. And how can we make that work? And so Wendy's, as you guys might know, their beef is never frozen. At least that's what they say. I don't know. But they chose not to compromise. Their vegetables are cut daily, fresh in every store. So a lot of companies have figured out how to use yes, how to use and versus using or. Another example that I threw in the book was Southwest. So all of the cheap regional flights made the choice of, well, cheap fares and or good experience, right? So cheap fares or good experience. Southwest said no. Let's see if we can make it cheap fares and good experience. What does that look like? Right? And so Southwest to this day has one of the highest customer reviews, even though they don't have, as you guys know, they don't have a first class or a business class. It's just a straight up 737, right?
They do now.
Yeah, they do now. Yeah. So
They changed that.
yeah, and they also changed the boarding from just having seat numbers, but for the longest time, it's just been, the straight up, what do you call it? Economy seats. But they made sure that it was clean, and they were the last holdups for peanuts. Remember that time when there were peanuts on the plane? Fond memories. So Southwest decided, yes, we're gonna try to keep our prices very competitive and also keep the customer experience good. So trying to find a way to get to yes, we're gonna do both of them. We're gonna find the good in both opinions is one of the negotiation skills that's really hard to do, because you have to be able to park your own prejudices, your own thoughts, your own opinions at the door so that you can, as much as you can, as much as humanly possible, listen to both sides, right? With a beginner's mind. Like, Nick, tell me, where are you coming from? Let me try to understand you. Let me try to advocate for your point of view, and really go into it with that intent. And then you flip the script, and then you go to, for example, Leona, and say, okay, Leona, let me understand where you're coming from with this, and really dig into it, so much so that you can advocate for her point of view. Does that make sense? So you try to go in deep into both points of views, and once you truly understand it, then you say, you know what, these are the merits that I see in, the folks on the left side of the room, and these are the merits that I see in folks on the right side of the room. Now let's figure out a way that we can hopefully get the best of both opinions and create the third alternative, right? Let's create something that neither one of us came in with to begin with. So part of the negotiation skills is really trying to understand where both parties are coming from. And the second part of it is ensuring that we're going for a win-win, right? So we're going for a solution that works for all parties involved. So as you're establishing, the folks around the table, you want to make sure that you have the right roles, responsibilities, you have your priorities in check, and you also have the right assignments. Like, okay, so because a lot of these, especially if you're doing like a merger and acquisition, I was helping with Hawaii Health System, and this was over more than half a year. And you have different assignments. So like, hey, Ian, you're in charge of the technical stack, and try to look at how can we consolidate, the tech stack for this new entity. And so you want to make sure that everyone is clear as to what their swim lanes are, what their focus is, so that when you come back and meet again, you don't divert from your swim lane, so to speak. So we'll go more into this as we go along, but there's so much that goes into negotiation skills, but it all begins with your willingness to listen, and listen with the intent of understanding, not listening with the intent of coming up with a comeback, right? Which is what we see if you watch cable news, right? You're looking at the screen, you have four people, you have a moderator in the middle, and they're just waiting for their turn to speak. They're not really trying to understand it. Patrick, let me understand that point on, this bill or that bill. No, they have their talking points ready to go. And once it's their time, boom, they just let it out with no regard to what the other person just said. So that is the opposite, right, of negotiation skills. That's the opposite of listening with the intent to understand. All right, internal and external team member communications. As you can see here, when you hear the word communication, you want to underline the word regularly. Regularly, frequently. It is the frequency that is a huge part of your communication. It's not just how you communicate, it's not just what you communicate, it is when you communicate. And the more you communicate, the more frequent, the better. And you want to adjust it, going back to our RACI matrix, right? If they're intimately involved in the project, you're communicating all the time. If they're more on the periphery but want to know how it's going, then you communicate maybe on a monthly basis. And if they're indirectly and they're just affected during go live, then you make sure you communicate then. Collaborate between teams and external teams or stakeholders. You want to make sure that, so two types of communication. There's the push and the pull. Does anyone want to take a stab at the difference between the two? Push communication and pull communication.
I guess push communication is I'm going to be proactively outreaching to somebody else to send them information, versus pull, maybe I'm going to reach out to them to try and proactively pull some information out of them rather than waiting for it.
So you're 50% right, Pete.
I'll take it. Hey,
Yes,
I'll take
yes,
it.
yeah. So push is when you're sending things out, right? Here's the latest, here's where we are. Your status reports, those are push communication. Pull communication is when you send them a link. Like, hey guys, here's the link to our SharePoint. In the SharePoint, you'll find project status, technical requirements, this and that, minutes of previous meeting. They're all on this link. So what the other person has to do is to go into your SharePoint link and they need to pull information out, right? So you notifying them is push, them going to the link and getting information is them pulling it. So that's the difference between push and pull. Cool. So please, I'll give you guys a second to write that down, because that's also something that I've heard students say that comes up in the test. So push communication is something that you initiate, you're sending out. Pull communication is what the other, team member, stakeholder has to retrieve themselves, right? Okay. Conflict management. All right, so let me fix this guy right here. So good conflict management leads to improved understanding, performance, productivity. Bad conflict management leads to destructive behavior, animosity, poor performance, name calling, reduced productivity. And as you can see, again, I'm gonna go back to cable news. Which one does cable news do a lot of? Is it the good conflict management or is it the bad conflict management?
Bad.
That's right. There should
I
be
don't
a
think they
third
manage
one.
at all.
And there should be a third one, like really bad or don't even bother to manage, right? So rarely,
Create the conflict.
right? Rarely do you see these there's one that I'm addicted to. It's on YouTube. It's God, what is that guy's show's name? He was on CNN before. Why am I blanking on his name? But he brings on, like two different parties, and they're always they start out civil for maybe 7 seconds, and they eventually just end up shouting at each other, and towards the end they're name calling, and God, like it is like the worst way to do, conflict management, but he gets like millions of views, right, on YouTube. And I'm one of those poor souls that just can't resist. And every time I'm like, why did he interject? But anyway, but it's good for views, right? Bad conflict management. It's good for clickbait, I guess. But for running a project, it's absolutely horrible, right? So um you want to make both parties understand, or multiple parties understand, that your intent is always to have a win-win-win situation. Your intent is to make sure that, number one, we do no harm, right? Your intent is to make people know that the goal of the project is to make people affected by this better, not worse. So let's figure that out. And you also have to understand that there are going to be instances wherein people are going to be inconvenienced in the short term, right? For example, that interventional radiology construction work, for, how many weeks that we did that, people had to walk around, right? And so these are things that you have to accept, but you need to explain, like, we're doing this so that, other people don't get radiation that shouldn't, or, things don't leak from the wall. So that's why we're doing this. So a lot of times conflicts arise because of lack of understanding. And when there's lack of understanding, frustration fills in that void. And rarely is it about the person. More often than not, it's about the communication style, what is communicated, and any misunderstanding, especially in the terms being used. And one of the things that, have you guys read the book A Crucial Conversation? It's an oldie but goodie. I'll throw it in the chat. It's an amazing book, and the audiobook is even better. I highly recommend that you get the audiobook. Just listen to it on your way to you're driving somewhere. Probably listen to this, easily 5 times, because it is so true. And one of the main tenets of the book is that when you notice that people are no longer feeling safe in the conversation, when they're either going towards fight or flight or freeze, fight, flight, or freeze, that you need to stop. You need to stop the negotiations, and you need to work on getting people back to a feeling of safety. Now, that could mean let's all take a quick 5, right? That could mean, hey guys, it seems like we're getting too heated and we're no longer talking about the subject matter, we're talking about each other, right? You need to stop the conversation and redirect it. And sometimes the best thing you can do is take a quick break, right? Everyone just kind of take a break, buy a break, get something to drink, shake it off, walk around the block, and let's come back and review, right? Let's review the guidelines. Let's review the ground rules. Let's review the goals of this negotiation. What is it that we're trying to achieve, right? So as the facilitator, you have to be very keen on sensing when the conversation is no longer productive, it's no longer on point, and starts leading into, you know, destructive behavior, animosity, contempt, or it starts, instead of talking about the issue, you're talking about the person, right? And this rule also applies in our private lives, right? So a lot of times, arguments, especially if, you have a significant other, starts with something simple. And before you know it, the mother-in-law is somehow involved in the conversation. Like it just blows up and it's just taken out of proportion. I'm like, how did we get here? We were just talking about where to get dessert. Like, how did we get here? And the how did we get here is usually when you pivot from the topic to the person. And when that happens, then it's, the gloves are off. So make sure that you pivot back to the topic and away from the person. All right, which perfectly ties into, right, when people violate the ground rules, what do? Right? So the first one is to halt the conversation, pause, whether it's a quick 5 or a complete rescheduling. Guys, let's pick this up tomorrow, next week, whatever it is. And we need to, get people to calm down and refocus on the values, refocus on the shared expectation, refocus on transparency. And what you'll find is that if you continue when people are no longer in the right headspace, you're actually going to spend a lot more time trying to undo the harm that's been done. So one example, I was pulled into Stanford to help with a dispute that they had with Adobe. And this stalled the project. They were trying to move more than 40,000 web pages onto Adobe. Ginormous project, right? And I can't get into the details, but suffice it to say, they couldn't agree on the terms, right? And there were threats of, getting legal involved, so on and so forth. And at the time, the CTO said, let me see if I can bring a friend of mine to see if we can get to a better place. And so I spent maybe 5 weeks meeting with different individuals, really digging into their point of view, what's going on wrong, and how to fix it. And then we had several meetings after that. And what I like to do is create what's called the floor and the ceiling. And what that means is the floor is what is the absolute non-negotiable. We're not going to go lower than this, right? It's the floor. And we're not going to budge on this. The ceiling is, it would be amazing if we can get to this point. This is so non-negotiable to aspirational. You guys still with me? So you do that for every stakeholder. What's your non-negotiable? What's the aspirational, right? Floor, ceiling. You go around and you do that, and then you look at where the floors are different, right? Where the non-negotiables are not aligned, and you focus on rectifying that. Once you can rectify the non-negotiables and see if you can adjust, negotiate, then the ceiling is no longer an issue. So in the case of Stanford v. Adobe, Stanford wanted to have their best, Adobe's best resources for this project. Adobe, on the other hand, booked the resources for a time period, but Stanford started late, so those resources were booked to another project, right? And so the floor for Stanford was, we need to make sure that the resources on Adobe's side can help us if we have problems, right? And the floor for Adobe was, well, we'll provide the resources, but we need to get paid what was agreed upon in the initial contract. So went back to Stanford and say, okay, if I can get a commitment from Adobe to provide the support that we need, forget about the hours for now, but the support that we need to get us to a successful go live, will that work for you? And Stanford reluctantly said, yes. All right, that can work. And on the Adobe side, I told them, when Stanford calls, and I'll make sure that when we call, it's something we've exhausted our internal resources. We don't know the answer to. Will you commit to sending someone to help us out? And they said yes. And we were able to move the project along. So they were stalled for 18 months. We were able to get back on track in 6 weeks. So that's an example of how the ground rules at some point were violated by both teams, and how I was able to pull both to the negotiation table and figure out the floor and the ceiling. So remember that as you're bringing different parties together, try to figure out what their floors and ceilings are. What are the non-negotiables and what are the nice to have? And if someone violates the terms, bring them back to it. Oh, Curlin, thank you so much. 15 minutes chat. Awesome. So, all right. So negotiation project agreements, SLAs. So service level agreement, this document outlines, right? What are we getting, right? What are we getting? When are we getting it by? And this has a little bit more detail, right? Than say a master service agreement or the SOW. So this is the service level agreement, or SLAs. Performance report. You want to have what was expected, the planned, and what was actual. How did we do? Resource calendars. For the test, you want to include on the resource calendar when folks are available, and also when they're not available. So In the beginning of the project, you want to ask folks, hey, any big vacations coming up in the next 6 months? Any holidays that you celebrate? So you put that all in the resource calendar. So for the test, when folks are available and when they're not. Go live blackouts. So for the usually 2 weeks before go live, you don't want people to be out unless obviously it's a family emergency, so that you can have all hands on deck if there are any issues. And for the tools, you have the negotiation skills that we talked about, and we're going to talk about that more as we go along. Expert judgment, we talked about this a lot, and the lessons learned. And okay, one thing for lessons learned, when you think about lessons learned, what comes to mind? What lessons are usually shared? Like, these are our lessons learned. Is it positive or is it negative?
Negative, I would say.
Right? And that's just human tendency. Lessons learned is almost always the things that went bad. So
Right.
for the test and in real life, make sure that you also captured what worked. What were the good things? What made the part successful, right? So you want to talk about the good, the bad, and hopefully you don't have this, but the ugly, right? Good, bad, and ugly.
But
So lessons learned.
aren't the good things always discussed throughout the project while it's happening? And the
Yes,
negatives are not necessarily brought up. Yes, you know about them, but you want to reiterate them at the end because there were issues that
yes.
could have been okay.
So you bring up a really good point, Henning. Good things are usually brought up as it happens. Bad things are usually brought up at the end. That's a really good point. What you want to be able to do is to do both all throughout. You want to bring up the good things, and you also want to bring up the things that didn't work, so that in the next milestone, the next phase, the next gate, whatever next is, you're able to learn from it and apply it right away, right? The tendency we have is to kind of smooth over the negative, right? And then towards the end, that's when we bring it up. So Nick, how did you really feel? And at that point, it's kind of too late for this project. It'll help someone else in their project, the same or similar, but not so much for this project. So for the test and in real life, things that you can do on Monday, as things come up, make sure to bring it up as soon as possible. Again, praise in public, criticize in private, but bring up the things to the group that we can work on, right? So again, focus on the process, focus on the task, and focus on what we can do differently, and not necessarily, oh man, Victor again, right? So that's not helpful. So, but you bring up a really good point, Penny, and something to remember for the test. You want to bring up the good and the bad throughout and not just at the end. Okay, project agreement objectives. So we'll talk about this more when we get to quality management, but there are different criterias when you're looking at projects. There's the criteria that's on the requirements, that's quality. And there's a criteria based on the stakeholders, and that's more stakeholder management. You want to identify the deliverables and acceptance criteria. In a traditional method for Agile, you're kind of doing it as you go. And so and we'll go through the agile storytelling. We'll go through the definition of product backlog. We'll go through definition of done, so don't worry about this for now. User stories will explain all of that, but just know that in waterfall in general, right, typically things are finalized, decided upon upfront, and in general in agile things are decided upon, acted upon, as you're going along, right? So there's a method to the madness, but it's a little bit more flexible. So we'll go through that more as we go along.
question. What exactly
Is that-
do you mean by deliverable?
Yes, so a deliverable is either a tangible product, service, or result, right? What happens or what comes about? What's the outcome that comes about from doing all this effort, from doing all this work? So for example, I'm gathering what works for the team. I'm gathering what doesn't work. I'm gathering how often do we meet. I'm gathering how we meet, right? And the deliverable would be your team ground rules document, for example, right? So that end product that you have in your hand is the deliverable. What comes about from doing all of this effort? Does that make sense, Lizette? Cool. So a bigger example would be I'm putting together 4 wheels. I'm putting together 4 doors. I'm putting together a dashboard. I'm putting together an engine. I'm putting together car seat steering wheels. What's the deliverable? What are we working towards?
A car
Yeah, it sounds like a car.
A car. We're putting together a car.
or something
So
like
that's
that.
Yeah, the goal isn't just putting the 4 wheels together, right? The goal is to eventually put together the car. Now, if you're looking at the task level, then maybe the task would be that the wheels align. Maybe the task could be the deliverable is that when you close the door, it actually shuts, and you can lock it, right? So those are smaller deliverables on a task level. So what do you get from doing all of this work? Right? Which is a common question that wives have for husbands when husbands are in the garage for too long. What are you trying to do? What's the deliverable? And usually the answer is nothing. We're just hanging out in the garage, no deliverable. All right, agreements. So agreements define the intention. So this could be in a form of a contract. And we'll go through, when we get to procurement management, we'll go through the different types of contract, fixed fee contract, all that. Memorandums of understanding, again, all of this on procurement. What's the difference between an MOU, difference between an memorandum of understanding, MOA, what's the difference between service level agreements, what's the difference between a request for information, RFI, all of those things. But for this part, suffice it to say that there are different types of agreements, and those agreements serve different things, and there's different levels of details for the different agreements. So don't worry about it right now. This is just an intro to it. But once we get to procurement, we're going to break down all of the different contract types. Okay. All right. So always aim to reach an agreement during negotiation, because again, the goal of negotiation is not just to talk. The goal of negotiation is to reach an agreement. So going back to your question, Lizette, the deliverable of negotiations is,
Sorry, can
finish
you?
it for me. An agreement, right?
Oh.
The goal is to get to an agreement, right? So that's the goal. Negotiation strategies. So there are different strategies depending on, what type of methodology we're using, but suffice it to say there are some commonalities or universalities when you're negotiating, whether it's agile, that's fast paced, or traditional, where it's like start finish relationships, and that's clearly figuring out the performance. What is it that we expect, right, for each part, each section? What is it we expect in terms of deliverables? What is it we expect in terms of timelines? So That might change, right? So in Agile, the timelines are, within a certain sprint, might be flexible versus a waterfall. But nonetheless, the clarity that you have, right? All parties understanding what is expected is the main thing, whether you're doing Agile or whether you're doing waterfall. Every party should be clear on what the expectations are. And negotiations, so these are some of the documents that are used in the different agreements, statement of work, schedules with milestone and dates, performance, how we're going to measure that, pricing and payment. For those of you who work with contracts regularly, these are very common. For those of you who don't work with contracts regularly, this might be new, but don't worry, as we go through the 10 weeks, this will be very familiar with you, okay? All right, and I have a few more slides before we end for the day. Prioritization techniques. Has anyone been to Cold Stone ice cream lately? Or you still remember the sizing? So there's like, nice to have, want to have, must have, like the biggest one, right? Um, so it's just, so for your prioritization, we talked about this a little bit earlier. What are the must-haves, right? These are, again, the floor. These are non-negotiables, must-haves. What are the should-haves, could-haves, and wouldn't-haves, exclusions? So there are different ways for prioritizing things and determining the objectives. And again, for me personally, the easiest way to think about it is the floor and the ceiling. Floor is, thanks, Carlin, appreciate it. Floor is the non-negotiable, and ceiling is the should-haves and could-haves. So must-have would be the floor, should-have, could-have could be your ceiling, things that are nice to have, right? And wouldn't have are the exclusions, so not part of the room altogether. So let me start right there. It's a perfect way to stop. We're about midway. And let me stop sharing, and love to get your thoughts. We have officially completed session 1 of 10. So we're 10% of the way there. Thanks for sticking through. So just love to get, as we said, some feedback, and then any lessons learned, things that you picked up. We'll do 3 shares, and then we will close out the session. So 3 shares, either things that you've learned, any feedback, or just something that you want to share. So 3 shares for the day. This is the unstructured part, so don't
Learn
think
what
about
race
format.
means.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
What was it?
I said I learned
Yeah.
what race means.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Cool. Awesome. Awesome. And what do those acronyms mean?
Responsibility, accountability, capacity, and inform.
Consult.
What is it?
Consult.
Yeah.
Consult. Yeah. Or consultation. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. 2 more. Francisco, you will never get in trouble for oversharing. So over communicate, less likely you'll get in trouble than under communicating. Absolutely. And 1 more to close out for the day.
Push and pull communication. I always had pull different in at least how I was using it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, me too. That was a good one.
Yeah, push and pull communication. And Pete, what is the difference between push and pull?
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot. I got
course.
push right, so I don't need to answer that. But pull
right.
would be sending out like a hyperlink and expecting somebody to go and retrieve a document and then do whatever they need to do with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cool beans. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I will send out the Zoom recording. And Curlin, I'll find that text document and I'll send it to you as well. And make sure that you guys are all signed up, ready to go for the first study session with Michelle on Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on which group you're in. And if you're
Ian,
not,
if you want, sorry, if we wanted to kind of deeper dive in this, what chapters did we cover today in the book?
so for chapter 6 for Michelle, it's solely different because hers is the different knowledge areas. That's version 6. For the book, the version 7, it's should be the first 3 chapters somewhere there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
No worry.
Is there anything we should read before the next session, or how does that work?
If you have the PMBOK with you, chapter 7, it's always good to start reading it now. And you don't necessarily need to read in advance, but if you can finish the book in the next 10 weeks, that would be ideal. And of
Got it.
course, if you want, the stories that, we go into, the companies and whatnot, that's in the other book that I shared with you guys, the Flow Like Water. So a lot of the details of it is there. Yeah, so
And
not
just
today.
oh,
Yep.
just
Okay,
a
Mike, sorry.
reminder, PMBOK 6 and 7 are both in your Google Classroom, so those are there. And
Yes.
you know that those
Yes,
people who are
yes.
asking for printed books, Noreen is working on getting those arranged so you can either pick them up, or if you're not in state, shipped out. I know that's all in process.
Absolutely. And yes, we'll be on the corner of Wilshire with your books and selling corn and hot dogs and PMBOK, anyone? PMBOK? Cool. Well, thank you guys for your questions and for an engaging first session. We're 10% through, and I will see you Friday, same time, same bat station.
Thank you.
Take care,
Thank
guys.
you.
Hey, thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Ian.
Take care.